Hello, pattern readers. Today I'm going to do something a little different for a how to adapt video. I'm going to incorporate a theory from another fan creator on how the dragon from the Wheel of Time should be adapted. This discussion is going to include my own ideas on how the figure of the Dragon Reborn should be presented in the TV show and what changes might need to be made from the books, as well as a theory from James from Wheel of Time on how that might be done in the first season. If you didn't watch the song parody contest on the Dusty Wheel, first of all, you absolutely must, but you probably missed James's awesome entry. Here is just a little taste of it.
I tell you this life is lonely, running away from the old me. I tell you this life is lonely, running away from the old me.
Running, they say I run with the wolves, I run with the wolves, yeah. I told them call me young bull, it's two legs with different rules. They say I run with the wolves, I run with the wolves, yeah.
So if you enjoyed that, you absolutely have to go check out more of James's animated music videos featuring characters from the Wheel of Time on his YouTube channel, Wheel Up Time, and be sure to give him a subscribe. The rest of this video will contain spoilers for the first book, The Eye of the World, and the beginning of The Great Hunt, so be forewarned. Also, just to be clear, I'm talking about how to adapt the character and figure of legend called the Dragon Reborn, not the book titled The Dragon Reborn. Just didn't want that to be confusing up front. Now let's get into it. First, just a quick summary of how I think the dragon is presented in the first book. There's a lot of in-world misunderstanding of who the dragon is and what role he has to play. Most people probably know there was someone called the dragon in the Age of Legends, and that he was involved in the breaking of the world. Because the breaking killed a ton of people and destroyed a civilization and literally reshaped the entire structure of the continent, anyone who was involved with that, let alone maybe the person who began it, sounds pretty bad. All men who can channel are feared and hated because they can't help going mad, and in their madness, they caused the breaking. And the dragon is sort of the worst of all men who can channel in most people's minds, if they believe he actually existed. Most people have also heard of the prophecies that the dragon will be reborn right before the last battle, also called Tarmangaiden, when the Dark One will either destroy the world or be defeated. But most people have little to no idea of the specifics of what the prophecies actually say. So the dragon, as a figure, is feared and not understood by virtually anyone. In Book 1, we start to hear stories about how a few men across the continent are proclaiming themselves to be the Dragon Reborn, most notably Logan. Most people probably believe that Logan is a false dragon. On the other hand, he has amassed a ton of followers, and Logan can actually channel, and powerfully so. At the same time, the forces of the Dark One are seeking one of, or possibly all three, of these three young men from Emond's Field. By the end of the book, we learn that Rand can channel, and that Moiraine, who actually has knowledge that most people don't, actually believes that he is the Dragon Reborn. Now, a little commentary on which aspects of this presentation in the book I think work really well and have the potential to work well in the show, and which aspects should probably be changed so that they can work better. I think one essential piece of Robert Jordan's vision is the idea that people really don't see the Dragon Reborn as a hero. So that when Rand is told that he is the Dragon Reborn, or that Moiraine believes he is, and the Amyrlin seat as well, it's not like being told he is a hero or a chosen one. It's like being told he is one of the worst monsters he's ever heard of. And when people who love him find out that he can channel, it's like being told that he has a dangerous illness that will eventually kill him and potentially people around him as well. All of this affects how Rand reacts and how his friends react to the revelation. And I think the show really needs to maintain that. And the more the audience can be convinced to be a little afraid of the dragon as well, the better, because then they'll also have strong but mixed feelings about it as well. So I think the show can use the canon lack of knowledge and misinformation that is so common in the books to their advantage, to present the dragon in a dark as way as they wish in order to play up the fear and the danger. And now for something that I don't think works as well as it could. More than anything, finding out who is the Dragon Reborn is a little anticlimactic. It really isn't a surprise that it's Rand at all. He is the obvious main character in the first book. Most of the POVs are his. We know that the Shadow is looking for one in particular out of him and Mat and Perrin, and he stands out. Everyone's always commenting on how he looks like an Aiel. He doesn't look like he's from the Two Rivers. And we find out in the first few chapters that the parents who raised him probably weren't his birth parents. It's not a surprise, and I think that that's fine. Not everything needs to be a big mystery, and it probably doesn't really impact anyone's enjoyment of the series. But being a different medium, a lot of things are likely to be a little different anyway in the show, and so it presents an opportunity to make the dragon's identity a mystery. I like this idea in general just because the Wheel of Time is actually great at mystery, really fantastic. And it's something that can really pull people into a series, whether it's in the books or on screen when it's done well. So why not have this be the first really big mystery that works and will hopefully set up the many other mysteries that are to come. Now I'm going to get into that theory I mentioned at the beginning and present it to you as a way of discussing how the show might go about making the dragon's identity a mystery. I will be including some additions of my own and some specifics on how my own ideas might differ a little bit from James's. According to this theory, the first 3 episodes or more would each focus more on a specific character's POV than others. If it works this way, we would still get bits of perspective from other characters, such as Winter Night in Emond's Field, but we would be primarily focusing on the perspective of one character at a time. In the case of the first episode, Leave Taking, that character would be Rand, very similar to how it is in The Eye of the World. Even though some fans think we won't see scenes of the Althor farm or Rand journeying back to Emond's Field carrying Tam, James thinks that we will. He argues that it wouldn't make sense for Tam to be armed when they first go into the village, and that requires a trip back to the farm to get that sword. He thinks we'll end up seeing pretty much a lot of the same details we get about Rand in the books, possibly even Tam's fever dream, where we learn that Rand was probably not born in the Two Rivers. And without any context for this, he thinks it won't be too much of a giveaway. But we can't have the focus all on Rand. So in this case, episode 2, Shadows Waiting, would shift to focus on Mat. This will be the episode where he obtains the ruby-hilted dagger. And this is clearly given some significance based on this footage where he is very deliberately picking it up, rather than snatching it at random as he's trying to defend himself from Mordeth. If we are drawing from the books, this episode could also feature Mat speaking the Old Tongue without realizing it. And if we can get a scene in an inn, perhaps in Tarn Ferry, we could get a scene of Mat dicing and someone telling him he has the Dark One's own luck. Episode 3, A Place of Safety, would then become primarily about Perrin. It seems likely that this could be the first episode where he has an encounter with the wolves. And now, speaking for myself here personally, not for James, I think it's unlikely that we will actually see Elias in season 1. To me, I think this actually makes a stronger case for Perrin's connection to the wolves being more of a mystery that can be used as a red herring, because we'll have less understanding of what's actually going on than we would if Elias were there to explain it. So I think the lack of casting information, but this as a secondary reason is really the strongest argument for no Elias in season 1, because we can really play up that mystery and uncertainty of what is happening with Perrin. James also argues that we might get Perrin's flight from the Ravens into the steading in this episode. Though, speaking for myself here, I think that's unlikely to be in this episode because there is evidence that we will see the Tuatha on in episodes 3, 4, and 5. So I expect that Perrin and Egwene will still be with the Tuatha on at the end of episode 3. The last argument from James for this theory is that we've seen similar patterns in ensemble shows of focusing on one character at a time. He names the shows Skins and Lost, and I would add in also This Is Us as another current popular show that uses this technique often. Now I want to add in some of my own ideas as well as more points of agreement or disagreement with the theory as presented. First of all, I think if they're going to go with this one main character per episode structure, we can speculate about how that might be continued past the first 3. So episode 4, titled The Dragon Reborn, I think could easily be Logan focused, as it is expected to feature the battle that ends in his capture with Aes Sedai. I think another way to really play up the threat of someone as powerful and dangerous as the dragon is to do that through the character of Logan. In episode 4, he'll probably be captured, but not defeated, not gentled. And so if we get to see him in action, we get a sense of how much damage he can do. It could be possible to convince the new audience that he really is the Dragon Reborn, so that his later gentling is both shocking and horrifying. Not entirely related to this theory, but then it could be interesting to then have episode 5 focus on Nynaeve and episode 6 focus on Egwene, or vice versa. Episode 7, which will bring our main cast to Fal Dara, would be a great time to feature Lan. And then episode 8, the final of the season, should absolutely be focused on Moiraine, given that we're likely to finally understand what her mission has been, right up until we get that reveal about Rand. And I would love for this final episode to also feature Moiraine and Swan telling Rand that he is the Dragon Reborn, and hopefully some flashbacks of their journey to discovering him. But let's back up a bit, because I think there's more the show can do to obscure Rand being the dragon. One thing I like about this theory is that the show can put a lot of the clues for Rand in the first episode, hoping maybe some people will have forgotten some of them as more evidence is presented for other candidates. Logain's presumed gentling in episode 6 would then leave the opportunity for maybe some more subtle clues in the last 2 episodes leading up to the reveal, after the most obvious candidate is eliminated. But even if episode 1 is Rand focused, I think it needs to be less so than the book. We're going to need introductions to a lot of characters, and I think a lot of them, or most of them, should not be specifically connected to when Rand encounters them. I think we will see a lot of Tam in this episode, but I think it's also possible that we won't see his near death. Now, I think it's possible to do his fever ramblings without it being completely obvious, and a part of me would really like to see that. But I can also see the argument for cutting it some or all to maintain some of the mystery. As for whether we would see scenes on the Althor farm, I'm a little bit mixed on that as well. I do think it's possible to cut it. They could make a point of Rand being spooked by the Fade earlier and telling Tam before they leave. We wouldn't even have to know until later that Tam took it seriously. It could be revealed that he packed the sword in the cart next to the apple brandy. And that could allow the two of them to be in the village during the attack. Now, a potential point in favor of this is a statement from Rafe Judkins saying that we would see Beltine in the show, which might mean that these images of a festival are actually Beltine, not Winter Night, when the attack occurs, and that would give the Althor men a reason to stay. A point against this potentially is that Rafe also said we would see Narg in the show. All of this to say basically that I think we will see some clues about Rand's identity in the first episode, but perhaps fewer than we get in the book. What are your thoughts, and will we see an attack on the Althor farm? Either way, I personally think we will also see some other things in episode 1 to balance that focus on Rand. I think the casting for Matt's entire family, as well as whoever Layla Ibarra turns out to be, indicates that we will see some scenes of their family lives, which we did not get in the books. So the scenes at home or at the forge for Matt and Perrin, I think will, of course, give us some insight into their characters, but hopefully also provide some fodder for this mystery as well. And then Pat and Fane being interested in any or all of the Taviran as well could also be a tool for this mystery in this episode. I'm hopeful from some audition script leaks that we will have a scene between Nynaeve and Egwene, and Nynaeve and Moiraine at least, that have nothing to do with Rand. And given the star power of Rosamund Pike and the increased focus on Moiraine, I can also envision having a scene between Moiraine and Lan in the first episode. There's a lot that has to happen in the first episode before they leave Emond's Field. So there's not abundant time to solely focus on Rand, and I think whatever other scenes they include should at least in part misdirect from any clues they might choose to include about Rand's identity. Side note here, but I think the casting that has the Two Rivers being a little bit more mixed in features than the books might describe could actually be helpful. Don't get me wrong, I think a close reading of the text makes it clear that people from the Two Rivers are generally brown-skinned, as well as universally dark-eyed and dark hair, which is very clearly described. But I think not having Rand be a head taller than everyone and literally the only light-skinned, light-eyed redhead in the region makes him not stand out quite as much. At least having a few others who are lighter skinned and or lighter eyes makes him not the sole standout. Beyond the first episode, I think keep some of the clues about Rand channeling, keep them subtle, and I agree very much with presenting evidence, red herrings for Matt, Perrin, and Logan, as maybe even others. So there are several instances where Rand channels in the books and then he has a reaction afterward. And I think they are subtle enough in the book, but when we actually see them, they might be less so. So they might have to be toned down a little bit or reduced. And we might even think about adding in some instances where we wonder if something similar is happening for Matt or Perrin. Also, if it is explicitly discussed that Tam raised Rand after finding him outside of the Two Rivers, I think it's possible to downplay this a little bit by having something similar occur with Nynaeve. One of the leaked audition scripts suggests that perhaps Nynaeve was raised by a wisdom and not born in Emond's Field either. I could see her sharing this not well-known information with Rand as a way to assure him that he is as much a part of the Two Rivers as she is, and perhaps it shows him worrying too much and Nynaeve downplaying it as this happening with more people than you might think. I should also add that I think that any potential clues for Matt and Perrin and Logan are unlikely to be contained in a single episode either. We will see Matt's growing connection to the dagger and how that changes his behavior, and I think the oddness of that could be seen as potential madness caused by saidin. For Perrin, his connection to the wolves will grow, his eyes will change. We'll potentially see him contemplating killing Egwene when he thinks they won't escape the ravens, and he will kill White Cloaks, so that darkness in him can also be played up for a few episodes. And if he is, seeing images or hearing voices in his head, that might also be a red herring for madness and cause him to wonder if he is going mad. I think a reveal that the dagger is causing Matt's behavior and Moiraine and or Lan explaining that being a wolf brother is not tied to the power or the Dark One will eventually cause attention to shift away from them. As for Logan, I think he should look like a strong contender in the way that he refuses to be cowed. Aes Sedai are afraid of him even though they try to hide it, and this should continue right up until he is gentled. One other potential point of change that I haven't discussed yet is what to do with the dreams of Ba'alzamon. They could include them, or some of them, but they'd probably have to show all three of them having the dreams. Of course, we know in the book they all three have them, but we never see it except from Rand's perspective. But I think even reducing them and showing all three of them have them wouldn't necessarily cut down on how much they reveal. I think it's maybe impossible to include something to do with dreams, but have them be much harder to understand. I also think it's possible that we won't see the character of Ba'alzamon in season 1 at all. The ending of book 1 is confusing, and part of that is Ba'alzamon and Rand thinking that he has killed the Dark One. So if they save that character for season 2, I wouldn't personally be upset at all. What do you think? So, if done right, there can still be some element of surprise when Rand is revealed. And if not outright shock, then at least dread, if they have successfully built up the fear of what it means to be the dragon. Built into this mystery is also the mystery of what Moiraine's intentions are and what she has been up to. And I think that potentially can be equally as important in the first season and revealed in the same time. What are your thoughts on this theory from James at Wheel Up Time, or any of the additions I've made or points where we might disagree? How do you want the show to handle the mystery of the dragon and the mystery of Moiraine? Leave me a comment, and if you enjoyed the video, of course, I'd appreciate a like and a share anywhere you interact in the Wheel of Time fandom. Go subscribe to Wheel Up Time, and to me too, of course, if you're looking for more on how to adapt the Wheel of Time and more on book-to-screen adaptations. And until next time, gird your loins, my friends.